So I've got an awesome social studies lesson for us today. So to start, we're going to close our eyes and cover our ears and close our mouths too. We're going to not speak, try not to listen to anything, and try not to look at anything just for a few moments. What did that feel like? Well, how would you be able to communicate or really do anything on your own if you couldn't speak, you couldn't hear, and if you couldn't see? Well, it would be very difficult to try to tell somebody something or to really do anything on your own. Someone very important in our history experienced these challenges for most of their childhood. Do you know who it is? Think about it for a second. They couldn't see and they couldn't hear for most of their childhood. Well, if you guessed Helen Keller, you're right. So, have you heard of Helen Keller? What do you already know about her? Think about that for a second. Well, this week we're going to learn more about her life. So to start, we're going to talk about her childhood. And I discovered this biography online on ducksters.com. Super cool, and it's super awesome for kids like you to learn more about people. And so that's where I got a lot of this information. So we're going to start by talking about, well, where did she grow up? Helen Keller was born on June 27th, 1880, so that was a long time ago, in Tuscumbia, Alabama. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have probably been to Tuscumbia at least once in your life. And she was a happy and healthy baby. Her dad, Arthur, worked for a newspaper, and her mom, Kate, took care of the home and baby Helen. She grew up on her family's large farm called Ivy Green, and here is a picture of Ivy Green. Some of you may have already visited Ivy Green before, and if you haven't, I really hope you get the chance to, because it's not very far away from most of your homes, I'm sure, since it's in Tuscumbia. But I have attached a video today on our virtual learning path so you can take a quick little virtual tour of Ivy Green, since we can't actually go there. So Helen loved the animals, including the horses, dogs, and chickens that lived at Ivy Green. So sickness. When Helen was around 1.5 years old, so she wasn't very old, she got very sick, and she had a high fever and a bad headache for several days. And because they were so bad, it made her lose her sight and her hearing. And that made her very frustrated. Helen tried to communicate with the people around her. She had special motions that she would use to indicate if she wanted her mom or if she wanted her dad, but it would make her frustrated. She realized that she was different, and it was really hard to let people know what she needed. She would sometimes throw fits and kick and hit people in anger. Because remember in the beginning when we closed our eyes and covered our ears and we couldn't talk, and how frustrated we thought it might be if we had to try to tell somebody we wanted something? Well, that's what Helen had to deal with. But then Sullivan came along. So when her parents realized that she needed special help, they contacted a school for the blind in Boston, and the school told them about Sullivan. Sullivan had been blind, but she'd had eye surgery that helped restore her vision. And Annie knew what it was like to have trouble with her vision, so they thought, this is perfect. She'll be able to help Helen. So on March 3rd, 1887, she became her helper, and she would be her helper and her friend for the next 50 years. So learning words. Annie began to teach Helen words. She would press the letters of words into Helen's hand. For example, one time she put a doll in one of Helen's hands, and then she pressed the letters of the word D-O-L-L into her other hand. She taught Helen many words. Helen would repeat those words into Annie's hand. But there was a problem. Helen didn't understand that the hand signs had meaning. But one day, Annie took Helen to a water pump. You've probably not really seen a water pump since we have faucets and sinks in our house, but I put a picture down here of the actual water pump that's at Ivy Green. So Annie took Helen to this water pump, and she started pumping it so water would come out. And she put Helen's hand into the water, and she spelled out water into Helen's other hand that wasn't in the water, and something clicked. Helen finally understood what Annie was doing. So after that, she learned a number of new words that day. And in many ways, this was probably the happiest day of her life. Learning to read. Well, after she learned what words were, Annie taught Helen how to read. Helen was very smart and Annie was an amazing teacher. So soon Helen could read entire books in Braille. Have you heard of Braille? Well, Braille is a special reading system where the letters are made out of little bumps on a page. And here's a picture of Helen reading. You see she's got her hands going over the little bumps on the page. So I actually got a chance to go to a special camp for people that have trouble hearing and seeing, and they take us to Ivy Green. Well, while I was there, I got a name tag, and they printed my name in Braille on the name tag, so the kids there with vision loss could run their hands over my name tag and feel my name. Very cool. So, learning to talk. So she's already learned how to read and she's learned what words are. So now she wanted to learn how to talk. She was very determined. So Helen Keller learned how to talk from a lady named Sarah Fuller. And Sarah was a teacher for the deaf. Deaf means you can't hear. By resting her hands on Sarah's lips, like you see in this picture, Helen learned how to feel sound vibrations and how the lips move to make sounds. We learned about vibrations in our STEAM time, and you remember how our throat would make vibrations? Well, you can feel those vibrations on your lips too. Try it out. Try saying something and feeling of it. You can feel how your lips move, and you can also feel the vibrations on your throat. So she learned how to speak doing this. She started off learning a few letters and sounds, and then she advanced to words, and finally she could speak in sentences. Helen was so happy that she could say words. So then, she's learned all this. She can read, she can talk, so she wanted to go to school. At 16 years old, Helen went to Radcliffe College. And Annie went to school with her to help her out. She helped to sign what the professors were saying into Helen's hand. And Helen ended up graduating from Radcliffe in 1904 with honors. So that means that she was very smart and she did very well in school. Here's a picture of her with her graduation cap and gown on. So she didn't stop there. During college, Helen began to write about her experiences being deaf and blind, because not a whole lot of people have those experiences, so she wanted to share her story. She wrote lots of articles for a magazine called The Ladies' Home Journal, and these articles were later published together in a book called The Story of My Life. And a few years later, in 1908, she published another book called The World I Live In. So here's a picture of the Story of My Life book that Helen Keller wrote. That's very impressive. I mean, can you imagine writing a book when you can't see, you can't hear? She did it all. She was amazing. And Helen was always one to help others. As she got older, she wanted to help other people like herself. She wanted to inspire them and give them hope and not be so frustrated like she was in the beginning. She joined the American Foundation for the Blind and traveled the country giving speeches and raising money for the foundation. Later, during World War II, she visited with wounded Army soldiers, encouraging them not to give up. She spent most of her life working to raise money and awareness for people with disabilities, especially those that were deaf and blind. So now that you've learned so much about Helen Keller, one of the activities today, or this week, whenever you'd like to do it, is to write your name in Braille. I've got the alphabet, and you can do the dots to spell your name. And I've also attached some videos, and I've already told you about the special tour. And then I've got one about the 5 different senses. So senses are like hearing and sight and smell. And you're going to try to pick out what you would need to learn about that object. So good luck. Can't wait to see it. So glad that you're getting to learn about Helen Keller because she is definitely one of my heroes. She's very inspiring. So enjoy your social studies this week. Miss you guys.